and actually, get that step moving forward. So thank you guys. All right, teaching lesson. I don't like this. Like, it feels like I'm being graded. Like the principal comes in the room, and usually they sit in the back with a clipboard, but for some reason my two bosses are sitting front and center. So the only thing that would make me better is Greg pulled up a chair right here and sat right there. Yes. Jamie's sitting in the back. She's usually up here, so I'll get the judgmental glares from back in that corner. I'll get Greg right there. The only escape is right there. Oh, I am Pastor Shiloh. I am the youth and children's pastor. Yeah, there you go. This is weird to, on this Sunday in December, have me with the mic on instead of a bunch of kids up there singing and dancing. Very odd. My entire December has actually been thrown off because usually I'm listening to Christmas music and theater from October until this very moment, and I have it just ringing in my head. I don't have that. So I'm actually able to think clearly and speak clearly for the most part, which might be more dangerous than if I was doing a Christmas program. So, very odd, but I was praying about what to teach. I'm the youth pastor. Do I teach about the youth? Do I talk about how great the kids are and everything, like the normal once a year children's and youth pastor sermon? What's next? The next generation, and didn't feel right about that. So, for those of you who don't know, I am a huge comic book and superhero nerd. So I was watching the very, very spiritual Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, great. Not thinking, not praying, just kind of watching it as my daughter was playing, just trying to make it through the day. And there's a part in that movie where this kid, Miles Morales, he is going to this super fancy school, this nice private school, but he doesn't fit in. He's different. He doesn't meet the standards that they have. So then he goes and hangs out with his uncle, and they end up graffitiing a wall. And on that graffiti, it's a blank image of him with the words "no expectations" behind it. And I saw that, and I'd seen this movie before, and it didn't stand out to me, but for some reason I was sitting there and I was like, oh, cool, that's cool. And then later on in the movie, classic Spider-Man, the uncle dies, but right before he dies, he asks Spider-Man, Miles Morales, what kind of person do you want to be? And that all of a sudden just, boom, that's going to be the sermon, that's going to be the sermon title, but instead of no expectations, I feel like with what kind of person do you want to be, there's great expectations. So the sermon title is Great Expectations. Just very briefly, this youth group is awesome. I will do a little plug right here. And they will be the first ones to tell you that I have very high expectations for this youth group. Not in a bad way, but I have very high expectations for them. And at first it almost came off as negative, but then I had a heart check, and then I explained it to them. There was a pastor that I was listening to who explained why expectations are there, and positive expectations. He talks about when you are done competing, and I am no longer a youth, I am not competing as a youth anymore. Those days are long gone if you ask them. When you are done competing, you ideally should be looking forward to benefiting the next generation, benefiting the next group that is behind you. And those high expectations aren't a bar that they can never reach. It's not an uncatchable goal, but it's something for them to push for, and it honestly should be your hope that they turn out better than you. So I have these high expectations of them, not because that's just the standard of the youth that we raise at RVCC, but it's because I know that they're capable of meeting those expectations, meeting and surpassing. The youth band leading worship, last year at the end of youth group, I kind of sat them down and I'm like, all right, this is the expectation moving forward. Since that conversation, they led a whole youth camp with no adult, help present. Jamie helped them leading up to it, but at the actual camp itself, and I will use this term not as just a blanket covering, but as an actual what happened, they led a revival at that campground for the entire service, 2 worship sets a day for 4 days straight. They led that. They were then presented, we were worshiping during the summer, and Grace Heitman, who isn't here today, but she goes to Impact. There's so many different names that I need to remember. Impact over in Richmond. She came up to me one Wednesday and was just like, Shiloh, I think we're supposed to lead an adult service. And I go, interesting. Then talked to Jamie, and she's like, well, the first Wednesday worship of the year is open. So they led the first Wednesday worship of this cycle, which is kind of daunting. We hadn't done it for 3 months up until that point, and they smashed it out of the park. They did amazing. And then for this, kind of a month-ish ago, I approached you guys. I'm like, hey, we're not doing a Christmas program. What are your thoughts on leading worship? And was met with a little bit of pushback, just kind of nerves, and I don't know, that's a whole different, Sunday morning is kind of the day. But they killed it. They crushed it. And that's not... So I am so beyond proud of you guys. You guys are doing great. Not just the worship team, but the youth group as a whole. You guys are awesome. Even Christian coming back. Man, what a drive. So, the big idea. God-given expectations are not weights that we carry alone. They are possibilities that we choose to step into. Pastor John has been teaching a sermon series on everybody gets to make a choice. I'm throwing my hat in the ring to have a chapter in the book. We choose to meet those expectations. I have these high expectations, but they don't necessarily have to do anything for that. They can just be normal. We don't need a worship team. We don't need a prayer group. We don't need an outreach group. Like, these things that are happening within the youth group don't happen just by me presenting the idea. It takes involvement. It takes them stepping up to the plate and actually meeting those expectations. So, naturally, we live with expectations. Who we're going to be, what life we're going to live. If you asked me 15, 20 years ago what my life would look like, I was going to be an NFL player, specifically on the Packers. After watching the game last night, that dream might still be alive, because it seems like everybody on that team is getting injured. My phone is ready. So if you don't see me for the next 3 weeks, just know, hey, I'm living the dream. But who they thought they would be, what they thought their family, faith, or career would look like, who is going to be their person, what they hope that they will eventually become. The disciples, as humans, had expectations for not only themselves, but also for the people that they are around, specifically Jesus. When they started following Jesus, they lived with expectation, but they did not get the outcome that they were expecting. See, our expectations can be skewed. They can be changed by different influences. They were expecting a political and military Messiah. Luke 24:19 through 21. And he said to them, what things? And they said to him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet and mighty in deed and word and before God and all the people, how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. And this little part right here. But we had hoped, I want you to remember that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things have happened. Audrey, could I get my water, please? Thank you. But we had hoped. That doesn't sound to me, thank you. That doesn't sound to me like it is an absent faith. That doesn't sound like they didn't have faith in this person, that they had some sort of hope and belief in them. It just sounds like it's disappointed faith. We had faith for this outcome, and it didn't happen. The Vikings fans in the room, you have faith every single year that your team is going to be good, and for some reason it doesn't happen. That's not absent faith. That's not gone. It's there. It's just disappointed. Yeah, right. Faith without works is dead. So they, the disciples, expected freedom from Rome, national restoration, and they expected Jesus to restore Israel after the resurrection. So they were not faithless, they were shaped by cultural experiences and cultural expectations. They were biblically informed, they knew what the word said, they were spiritually sincere, but they were culturally shaped. Their expectations, their ideas, their foundation was shaped by culture. Even with Jesus telling them what exactly he came on earth to do, they had that expectation that, he was talking about freedom from Rome. So after that happens, after Jesus does not set them free from Rome, doesn't restore anything, not to their expectation, at that moment, they have a choice. Do they lose all hope, or do they press in to the different expectation, to the true expectation that God had for them? So their expectation is transformed, not destroyed. Their expectation did not shrink, they matured. They grew, they learned. They said, oh, we saw it wrong. We saw it differently. We need to look at it from a different angle. They matured. Their life experience caused them to change the way they thought. Their hope shifted from outcomes to obedience. It was not, we hope that this happens. We hope that he returns and sets us free from captivity and from Rome, and that he restores this great nation. But instead it shifted to obedience. Instead it shifted to, we're going to go out and make disciples of all nations and preach the word. Their confidence moved from Jesus beside them to the Spirit within them. It was no longer this guy that they had expectations of. Instead, it moved into the Spirit within them, guiding them through and sharing the expectations and giving them the choice to step into those expectations. So Jesus never told his disciples to stop expecting. He taught them what to expect from God and what to give with their lives. These expectations are not sinful. Rather, they are evidence of purpose. Your expectations, your callings, your hope for things in the future is not a burden. Rather, it is evidence of purpose. It is evidence of you desiring to grow, to be different, to move in a direction. So, and here's where it ties into everybody gets to make a choice. Expectation always comes with a choice. It does not force obedience, but rather it invites a response. When I was in football, our coach, and the youth have heard this countless times, but our coach always preached E plus R equals O, which was event, but today I'm going to talk about expectation. So event plus response equals outcome, equals the next thing. So today, expectation plus response equals outcome. Your outcome is dependent on what your response is. Your expectation or your event is set by someone or something, and then it is our job to respond. How we respond gets us to our outcome. We all have different ways that we can respond to things in our life. And I'd be willing to bet that 9 times out of 10, the way that you respond changes the outcome. Like you said, you can choose A or you can choose B. B goes one way, A goes the other. Our response triggers the outcome. Joshua 24:15. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your father served in the region beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in the land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Not, this is the only option and the way, the truth, and like, you choose. Are you going to do this or are you going to do that? For me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Deuteronomy 30:19 through 20. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God and obeying his voice and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of your days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to you, your fathers, Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give them. Choose life. It's a choice. So our expectation, our calling, the blessing that's on your life explains what is possible, but choice determines what's going to be the reality. The expectation, the calling, is the big picture. The choice is the small steps to lead you to that picture. And a great example of that is Saul and David, King Saul and King David. And I did a big breakdown of this, and I'm only going to share a couple points just so that I could do the rest of the sermon on Saul and David. It's very cool to see the differences between the two when you actually study it out. So they viewed God's expectations differently. Saul saw expectation as pressure. He saw this calling, this anointing, as something to live up to, something that is unattainable, that is hard to reach, that is too much for a person to bear. So his response to that is that he acted quickly out of fear of man and their response, and out of fear of his own self-confidence. 1 Samuel 13, 8 through 14. He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me, and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. Perfect timing. It is crazy how things like that work, right? And Saul went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come with the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Mishmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly." What a great thing to hear from the spiritual advisor. "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you, for then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord had sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord had commanded him to be a prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." So out of fear for the Philistines, fear for the people who were scattering, all the people that were surrounding him were leaving. They were losing confidence in him. Out of fear of losing that respect, he chose to just jump into action, just do what was going to happen once Samuel got there. He tried to manage his outcome. He knew the expectation, and he knew the outcome that he wanted. His response was what he did in order to get to that outcome. He thought that by doing this, by giving the burnt offering and the peace offerings, by doing this, I'll receive that outcome that I've been promised. Saul tried to control what God wanted to develop. He wanted it instantaneously. God wanted to develop him into this role. He didn't rebel, he rushed. He moved into things too quickly. David, however, saw expectation as an invitation. He trusted God's timing. 1 Samuel 24, 5 through 7. And afterward, David's heart struck him because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing that he is the Lord's anointed." So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. There was an easy solution to David taking over his role as king, would be to kill Saul. Not even necessarily he kill Saul. Have one of his men kill Saul. The opportunity was there. It was presented to him. It was almost too easy. It could have been rushed. It could have been taken advantage of. There was tension, opportunity, but between that tension and opportunity, he chose self-control. He didn't choose to act out of his own will and his expectation of, well, God promised that I'll be a king. Maybe this is my way to become the king. He didn't choose that for himself. He refused to force what God had promised. David refused shortcuts even when they would have been justified. It would have made sense for him to kill Saul in order for him to take the role as king. It would have been justified, but it was not God's timing. It was not God's plan. David trusted what God promised to deliver. Both were chosen, both were anointed, and both were empowered by God's Spirit. But the difference is their response. They were given the calling, they were given the power to do it, but the problem wasn't the expectation. It wasn't the person. It was how they handled that expectation. And we have that opportunity. We constantly have expectations put on us by those we love, by those we work with, by those we don't love. But we also have a consistent expectation from God to live the life according to his will. So living up to expectations is not about direction, or it is about direction, not perfection. It is about the way that you are going, not doing it perfectly. Psalm 37, 23 through 24, the steps of the man are established by the Lord. When he delights in his way, though he may fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. So falling does not equal failure. There have been plenty and plenty and plenty of times that I have fallen, but that doesn't mean that it's over with, that the expectation is going to move on to someone else, that opportunity is past me. You know, when I was in college playing football, I was the starter my sophomore year, and then my junior year, I came to camp thinking I was going to be the starter, and one way or the other, the guy behind me took my spot. The coach said, Shiloh, you're just not meeting the expectation, not doing exactly what we think you should do, so we're going to try someone else at that spot. That was falling. I just was the starter and lost it to a guy who had never played the position before. But that didn't mean that I failed. I then had an opportunity to choose. Am I going to push to be better? Am I going to push to fight for that job, for that role? Or am I going to, well, coach says I suck. I might as well quit, join the band or something. Sorry, not a band. St. Olaf was a very, very musically gifted school. You were more popular if you were in the choir and the band than you were if on the football team. So maybe I should have quit the football team. I had an option. The failure that was that could have been seen as failure either was going to push me to be better or leave me in mediocrity. That it felt heavy. It felt like a burden because I started comparing myself to the other kid who took my spot. I started thinking, well, how can I start playing like him instead of doing what the coach specifically wants? We start chasing outcomes instead of obedience. Okay, well, I need to get back to the starter, so I'm going to do whatever I can to get back to that, even if it means not obeying what the coach says, not listening to what the opportunities that are presented to me. I'm just going to do whatever I can do, and no one's going to get in my way to get to that outcome. And then we choose to believe that God expects perfection instead of faithfulness. I started to believe that this coach expected me to do things perfectly. You better run with 100% effort. You better make every single tackle. You better know every single play by the back of your hand. When that wasn't the case. He just wanted me to do the little things right. Instead of playing for me, play in the system that he had, the plan that he had. And when I started doing that, I earned my role back. That came back to me because I stopped doing it my way and I started doing it the way that he wanted me to do it. Now there's stories, I have countless teammates who that moment was presented to them and they just quit, or they took the wrong route and they didn't get back to that position. They didn't get back to that spot as the starter because they out of frustration, out of the heaviness of that failing, of that falling, they began doing it their own way. So when we have that expectation, when we have that calling, we kind of take our mindset and be like, okay, how can I get there? When I was in college, the plan was that I was going to be a high school teacher. That's what I wanted to do, and it just wasn't working. I was getting told by my professors, Shiloh, if you do not drop this class, you will flunk out of college. I'm like, okay, the option. Don't have to tell me twice. I will drop the class. But I had to take that class in order to get to the science teacher spot. So a very confusing time, very weird. Okay, if I can't do that, then obviously I can't be a teacher. Long story short, get a vision from God, a calling from God to go into ministry, which was the last thing on my list. That was I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a pastor. I want to teach. I want to teach. I want to coach football. I want to be in the school system and have an impact on these kids' lives the way that my teachers did. But ministry, being a children's and youth pastor, wasn't not it. That's not what I wanted. But it wasn't, that was my plan, teaching. So I receive the calling. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into it. But I started doing it my way. I started pursuing the opportunities that were in front of me, thinking this is how I'm going to get to that point. It wasn't until I let go and let God show me and speak through me and guide me to this point that things really started falling in line. I was graduated in 2020, which was the big pandemic year. So half of my final year in college was spent at home, which was great. That's the only way I passed Spanish, was that it was at home. I had the computer with my professor, and then I had Google Translate right next to me. So thank goodness for, you will never hear me say anything bad about the quarantine. But during that time, I'm looking for jobs, I'm actively searching. Here was out of the question because my grandma was the children's pastor and Peter was the youth pastor. There was no way I was going to kick my grandma out, and Peter was just, Peter was Peter, the big Hungarian man who drives recklessly on the roads. Seriously, you can ask Ethan. The only time I ever buckled up on a youth trip was the first time Peter drove us to youth camp. We were sitting there in the front seat, and all of a sudden, okay, we're just going to slowly lock it in. But in my mind, there was no possible way that I could end up here. Here was kind of the major leagues for me. It was like, okay, I'm going to get to RVCC one day and be the youth and children's pastor there. But I thought I had to go through the triple A's, the double A's first. I actually was close to getting hired onto a mega church, which would have been huge. I would have had 300 youth kids right out of college, and that sounded appealing to me. But looking back, I would have not have been ready for that at all. At all. God's hand moves, that place then suddenly is going into a hiring freeze. They can't hire anyone. They can't interview anyone. It came down to the final two. I was close, man. And then that goes completely out the window. And I just go, God, where? Like, I am 3 weeks away from graduating college, and I don't have a job. I don't have any prospect because the one thing I just expected to happen just got thrown out the window. One thing led to another, lunch with you and Peter, and hey, would you be interested in this? Like, absolutely, I would. Like, it wasn't even a question. It was, this is what the outcome that I saw when God gave me that calling. That was the outcome that I saw, was here, doing this. Not necessarily with the adults, but with the youth and the kids. So that expectation does not get removed because we fall, because we feel the burden, because things don't go the way that we expected. But Jesus helps remove the weight of that expectation. They didn't disappear when I fell. When they called me and said, hey, we're not going to hire anyone, actually. That expectation didn't disappear. It just I didn't know where to go next. I didn't know what to do next. And that's where they reappear as direction. That expectation was still there. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard, you know that you're going to be a pastor. Now here's the direction. So we choose to live up to those expectations, not by leaps and bounds and getting from A to Z right away, the quickest path. It's daily obedience, consistent direction, and small, faithful choices. These small choices get you to the large goal. God isn't asking for a perfect life. He is inviting us into a faithful one. What are the small choices, the small decisions that you can make to get you one step closer to what God has for you? That's why I love the "Oh Come to the Altar" song, because it's Jesus is calling, and actively take this step up because his arms are open wide. He's inviting you. It's a direction. It's a way to go. So the expectations that God has for us are empowered, not earned by merit, status, or work. Back to, I use a lot of football references. That has been 90% of my life, has been some sort of football. You can have all the skill, the talent in the world, but if the coach does not put you in the game, you don't get to show off that talent. You can work the hardest. There was a kid that I played with in college who played is a very generous term. He was on the team. He wasn't that good, but his dad paid to have a multi-million-dollar turf field put in. The field was named after his last name. But he didn't get to just come on in because the dad gave him the right by paying for the field. The coach had to put him in. Philippians 2:12-13. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to the will and to work for his good pleasure. We've read this verse countless times in the last couple weeks. We've been teaching in the youth about the fear of God and being in awe of God. That doesn't say work out your own salvation with everything going perfectly and being like just this happy-go-lucky person. It says with fear and trembling. But it's God who works it in you. It's God who does it for you, both to will and work for his good pleasure. So God works in us, but it is our job to act. It is our job to move. He's not going to force us into any position. He's not going to make us do the things that we're supposed to do to get to this point. It is our job to act. God puts salvation and all of its blessings in us, but we have to work it out. We have to take the steps. You have to be saved by speaking it out and believing it in your heart, not just because it's there. It's not. We talk about your grandma's faith won't get you into heaven. Grayson, just because your brother is the youth pastor and your grandma's the children's pastor doesn't mean that you're just got the golden ticket into heaven. You have to work for it the same amount as Andrew does. That's pretty harsh. You have to actively do it. You have to work for it. Work out. Here's the one Greek word for the day. Katergazomai. Tabatamo. Katergazomai. To carry out the goal. To carry it to its ultimate conclusion. Not to get halfway and decide it's too hard and quit. Not to do one step and hope God takes the other 13. But to work it out to its conclusion, to finality. God not only gives us the ability to walk in total victory, but he also plants that desire in us. It should be your desire to do the things that God has planted on your heart. planted the vision on your heart, you had a choice to either follow that desire or say it's too big. That can go for any of us, any calling, any expectation, any hope for something bigger and better. There's a desire that God gives you. He doesn't just give you an empty promise and then say, find the motivation. You have that motivation. You just have to act on the motivation. God is always leading our born-again spirits under the influence of the Holy Spirit and the direction of his will. It's up to us to listen. It's up to us to act. He's always speaking. You just have to be willing to listen. When I'm sitting there watching this cartoon Spider-Man movie, he spoke through the things that I was seeing, and I could have been like, well, that was just the Chipotle I had last night acting up. Or it's the Spirit speaking through me. But we need to listen. We need to act. We need to not just be like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then just not do anything with it. I have a notes section in my phone of thoughts to meditate on, just things that people say or things that come up, and I put it in there, but I don't just never touch it again. It's a thought to meditate on, something to pursue, something to think about. There's no point in having the thoughts to meditate on if you don't meditate on it. The first one that was in there was from Michael Blanchard talking about how can you hear God in the small? I think it was one of your opening sessions and one of the few times that I'm in the service, and I hear that, and I'm like, that's really cool. That's a great question. So I put it in my notes and then meditate on it, pray about it. How do you hear God in the small? And the cool thing is then that one thing led to another. Michael actually was able to teach that exact topic to the youth group. To have that doesn't happen if I just go, oh, interesting, and walk on and move on with my life. The action of the Spirit. I would argue you guys needed to hear that, yes? Yeah, it was good. I mean, you don't just nod your head just to nod your head, but yes, right? There was weight to it. There was a purpose for that statement, hearing God in the small. And even if it's just one of you guys who actually gathered something from it, it was impactful. We just had you two and Javen, these two youth alumni, came back and preached a sermon on Wednesday about protecting the temple. And it was awesome. And I can tell you it was awesome because I was texting a separate youth who was in the service with us, and he was asking me questions, struggling with things, telling me, hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm having a hard time with this. And as he's texting me, they are answering his questions that he's texting me. So even if none of them got anything from it, one person came out of there with truth. One person came out of there with an answer. And it's because you guys were listening to the Spirit. You guys were being guided by the Spirit, even though someone kept muting the mic so we didn't get half of his teaching. But we're being led, and it's our choice. It was your guys' choice to teach that. It was your guys' choice to actually step into that. Javen was telling me that, was it a day before or during the day? Either within 24 hours, he was having a major heart check on what he was teaching and ended up changing half of his content. And I can tell you right now, what he changed was impactful, was so important for the actual teaching itself. He didn't have to do that. He could have just said, no, I'm just going to go with my notes. I'm going to go with what I feel comfortable with. I'm going to go. You could tell when he came up that he had conviction, that he was feeling that. And that's because the Spirit was working in him. The Spirit was working in you too as well, but Javen was just the one that I noticed more. It's fine. He's just been here longer, so, We have a say in what takes place in our life. I could have gotten the revelation that I'm going to be a children's pastor and say, absolutely not. I don't want that, and then move on in my direction. But I wouldn't have been walking in what God had planned for me. I could have said, I've seen my grandma in children's ministry. I don't want that life. I don't want the ministry life. And just moved on. And I could have been miserable the same way that I was miserable for the rest of that time. It was a struggle. It was not an amazing life that was being lived. Because I had no idea where I was going. I had no direction. I had no expectation. I had my expectation. I had my understanding of what I wanted. But I could choose to say yes or say no to that calling, that expectation that was being put on my life. So God puts it in, but we have to work it out. We have to actively step in. We have to make it the reality by doing the small steps of obedience. Youth camp this last year, or the in-between day. So we did kids camp, and then it was a back-to-back week. So we stayed up there for the in-between day, myself, and then about 13 of the youth. And we taught that night, a week before camp. Andrew texted me, and he says, "So you're going to teach something for that in-between day, right? Since it's a camp." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "Thanks for telling me to do my job. It was already planned, but he wanted to take credit for the idea that we're going to preach on that night. So you get like half credit for what happened that night." Yeah, we'll take the points. Praying about it, what are we supposed to teach? And he brought me to a previous sermon that I had done a while ago, but it was called Step Into Revival. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting title or whatever. So I teach on it, and the whole premise was that you need to take the step in. It's talking about the Israelites crossing, not the Moses crossing, but the Jordan with Joshua. This is the first thing that Joshua does when he assumes command. They had to step into the water, and then they would see the water recede. It wasn't stand there and wait for God to do the thing that he did when they were getting chased by the Egyptians. God instructed them to actively step into it. Now, they had a choice. We can either step in, look like idiots, and stand in the water up to our ankles, or we can stand on the outside and just hope something happens. They had the choice. They worked it out. They did the steps. They stepped into it, they crossed over, and they moved forward. It wasn't, let's go around, let's try a different way, but they trusted. They trusted him to just step in. The Spirit speaks. Every single day that I drive to church, I have to cross 36. I have to go across Lake Elmo Ave to get here. And the Spirit doesn't just speak about these big, crazy things, but it's also in the small details, in the hearing him in the small. I wasn't, sitting there listening for what God had to say in that moment, but I'm stopped at a stoplight, and I'm looking, and it goes green, and something just within me says, "Stop." I go, okay. In that moment, I have a choice. Why would I stop? I have a green light, and this light takes forever to actually get green, so I'm going to take it while I got it. Or I stop and listen. And actually looking, there was cars on the other side, and there were multiple cars. It wasn't just me. Every single person at that intersection sat still for about 3 seconds, and 3 seconds after it went green, and I'm not 1, 2, 3, but 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, a semi-truck comes barreling through, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, if I would have gone, I would have been in the middle of that highway with my daughter in the car on the way to mini staff meeting, which is why I think we should get rid of mini staff meeting, in my opinion. But never almost died coming to the normal meeting, but mini staff meeting, it's 1-0 at this point. But man, it would have been over. Mine and my daughter's life would have been gone at that moment if I didn't listen to the tiny little command just saying, "Stop, wait, hold on." And it was crazy. There was multiple cars there. Every single person at that light waited. And it wasn't a wait because we were looking down the way. Like I said, 3 seconds, that's long enough to think, okay, if someone hasn't stopped, they're going to stop by now. It took that tiny choice of obedience, that minute second, to just be, yes, okay. We have that choice. that situation isn't really about the expectation on our life, but it's about an expectation to listen and have that daily obedience, have that one instance, that small step toward the ultimate goal. So, expectation is an invitation. The expectations that you may feel may not be pressure, they might be God reminding you that there's more to life available. He might be reminding you that promise that he gave to you all those years ago. He might be reminding you of the calling that has been put on your life. Those expectations aren't a burden, but it might be the push you need to get the most out of life. So, I like to end with questions, something to think on. It's not homework, but something to think about, meditate on. Where have I treated expectation like weight instead of a calling? And if you are feeling weight, why? Is it because my calling is getting bogged down by the expectation of others? Because I tell them, oh, I'm going to Bible college, and now all of a sudden all these other people have an expectation of the type of person that I should be? Or are you putting your own weight on there because you're comparing yourself to someone, because you're comparing your journey to someone else's journey? Oh, I should be further along at this point. I should be closer to my goal, closer to my outcome. Expectation isn't a weight. It is a beautiful direction that we get to head in. What steps of obedience have I been delaying? There's people everywhere who God's been telling them, hey, go in this direction, do this, talk to that one person, invite this person over for dinner, have that conversation, make that move, make that life step, and you're avoiding it because of the fear of man, the fear of not succeeding. And then finally, what would it look like to trust God with the outcome? Not what can I do, not the Saul method of what can I do to get me to this end goal, but how can I trust God to get me there? Even though it might take longer, even though I can't rush, I can't take it faster. I'm ready for steps 4, 5, and 6, but we still need to get to step 2. And God, what does it look like to trust him with that outcome? It's more than just life. This life has so many choices, so many options, so many things to do, but it's up to us to actually step into it, make the choice, and live up to those expectations that have been placed on us by God. And again, it's not a negative expectation. It is something that'll take you further than you ever thought you could. Amen? All right. So normally the elders come up and pray. And again, expectation. I was talking to Andrew and them, and I want to have the youth who are willing come up and pray for people the way that the elders do. So if you have anything you need prayer for, the youth are ready and willing to pray over you. And I believe that they'll speak revelation into your guys' life. Amen? All right. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this season. Bless us as we enter this week coming to Christmas, that you remind us what we're here for, what we're doing, what direction we're going in. Just give us the subtle push that we need to get to the next step, to take that next step. We thank you for your direction. We thank you for your expectations. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Have a great day.